I'm here at Zion National Park in southern Utah to review the a7IV, which I've had for about 7 months now. And I'm going to compare it to the Sony a7S III, which I'm shooting on now. I'm going to tell you which superpowers each camera has and the problems with each camera. Now, surprisingly, the 4 is $1,000 cheaper than the S3. And it has more megapixels, 33 megapixels versus the 12 megapixels in the S3. The 4 is a fantastic stills camera. It takes great pictures. I took it out the other night and actually took pictures of the stars, and it did a fantastic job. Look at these results. All I did was put it in manual mode, set it for a 30-second exposure, opened up the aperture to 1.4 on my 24mm lens. Then I tried it with a bunch of different ISO settings. I also enjoyed taking this on our hike the other day, and I took a lot of photos. It's really easy to do because it has this little collar on here. It makes it so that it turns quickly into a photo and video camera without having to readjust all the settings. This is a superpower of the a7IV. It is a great stills camera. Now, in 24 frames or 30 frames, it's hard to tell the difference between the S3 and the 4. Both shoot in 12-bit 422, and they shoot in high codecs that allow for fantastic images. They also shoot in S-Cinetone, and making it very easy to match the two cameras together. But unfortunately, the 33 megapixels of the 4 makes it so that it is not a very good camera for slow motion. So even though it shares the same processor, it has to process a lot more because 33 megapixels is a lot more megapixels to process. Therefore, it simply cannot shoot 120 frames in 4K. All right, so I'm back in Arizona and I'm here. It's 104 out, so we're at the splash pad. These are my grandchildren and I'm paying them ice cream to be talent today. And I'm shooting with the a7IV, and my daughter Kate is shooting with my a7S III. And we're gonna do a comparison. Each one of these has a 24-70 G Master lens on it, although this is the first version and hers is the second version, so they won't compare perfectly. But what we're able to do is shoot some of the video of the kids here, and Kate and I are going to shoot the exact same thing. And because these are zoom lenses, I can zoom in a little more to adjust for the crop. So here is the 4 at 60 frames a second compared to the S3, which can go up to 120 frames a second in 4K. Now, with both cameras zoomed in at 70mm, the 4 is cropped in, so it acts more like a 105mm lens, while the S3 at 70mm cannot get any tighter. Now, in this situation, I could move closer, but the splashing water prevents that, so when you want that extra reach, the 4 has an advantage. On the other hand, when zoomed out to 24, the 4 acts more like a 35mm lens, so here the S3 can capture the whole scene, whereas the 4 is limited. In these situations, the crop is very frustrating. I will leave you to judge whether or not you think you need 120 frames a second or whether 60 frames cropped into 1.5 is enough. If it is enough, then the a7IV is your camera because it has a lot of other superpowers that the a7S III doesn't have. So to me, the main benefit of the a7IV is clear image zoom. And what the people at Sony have done is they've used all those extra megapixels in this camera to make it so that you can shoot 4K using the entire sensor or just a portion of the sensor. And what that means is you can either shoot wide open or you can crop into 1.5 and still get 4K video either way. It's genius. So for example, here I am far away from the birds here in this park, and now I can get in a little closer by just pressing the trash can button. Now to make the change, I have to actually stop recording when I press this little custom button I've set up on my trash can to pop in. And I wish they didn't have to do that. That's kind of annoying because, you know, you miss a little of the action when you do that. It would be nice if I could just punch in by hitting the custom button while I'm recording. And that's something I'm sure Sony could fix in a firmware update. But let's face it, Sony is not really good at firmware updates. Now, when Sony released the a7IV, it came with some new bells and whistles, and everyone, and I mean everyone, assumed that the a7S III would get those in a firmware update. Now, I don't want to make a video going over those differences because they could be outdated by a simple firmware update, an update that we still somehow think is coming. But I made a separate video over here showing the 5 things that Sony should add to the a7S III but haven't, and it's coming up on a year since we've been expecting that update. So if you see a link over there, that means that Sony has not yet updated that, and the 4 still has those 5 advantages over the S. But if it's gone, then well, thanks Sony, and we can move on. So now let's get to the last weakness of the a7IV, rolling shutter. Now, rolling shutter is a problem you get as the sensor is being scanned from top to bottom. And as it scans down, how fast it scans down means how much is it catching the action before it moves. On the Sony S3, it's less than 10 milliseconds before it scans from top to bottom. But on the 4, it takes about 26 milliseconds. And that becomes noticeable if your camera moves around or the subject moves around very fast. I took the 3 and the S4 and connected them together and whipped them around. Now, you normally wouldn't do this, but I was trying to show the difference between the 2 cameras. Now, there is some rolling shutter on the S3, but significantly more on the 4. Now, here's a video that I captured of my friend's son. He's coming home from a mission for his church, and he hasn't seen his parents in 2 years. Now, when I play back the pivotal moment and I whip from the family to the missionary, you can see that there's a rolling shutter issue. Things are being warped. Now, ask yourself this question. How did I feel emotionally as the camera whipped from the audience to the missionary and then I saw the missionary and the mother hug? Story is the most important thing because no one is going to tear up when they see that you did a whip pan and there was no rolling shutter. It's what you're filming that matters and the story that you're telling. But you know that. Now, all that said, it's something that I'm aware of. If I'm going to shoot fast action, I'm going to use the S3 over the 4. Why? Well, because I have both and I have that option. But if I had to use the 4, would rolling shutter be a problem for me? No, it wouldn't be a problem for me at all. Now, there are some other differences between the camera. The S3 has a brighter screen on the back and a better EVF, but those differences aren't going to show up in your work like slow motion does, or clear image zoom, or better photos. Those are the real differences between these cameras, and the reason that I have them both. Now, I don't think of these cameras as an A camera and a B camera. They have different strengths. So there are my thoughts. If you'd like to watch the video showing the 5 things that should be on the a7S but aren't yet, you can click it right there. And if it's not there, well, congratulations, Sony, thank you. And if it is there,